Welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way with God at the center. Today we're going to be talking about Revolver Carry. Why? In 2022, is it still relevant? Is it still practical? Is it still a good idea? Let's examine that today in this episode of Gunfighter Life. I'm going to plug in the bio, and then we'll get into the main topic. Who am I? A question we should all ask ourselves. I am, first and foremost, a servant of God, made in His very own image, a follower of Jesus Christ, a simple man called by God to the Great Commission to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Next, a little bit about my background and what God has allowed me to do and blessed me to do in life. Grew up what most would consider very poor in the backwoods of the southeastern and mid-Atlantic United States, hunting and fishing. Joined the Marine Corps at 17. Did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. So a decorated Marine Corps combat veteran. Infantry assaultman. After the combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also a veteran of law enforcement. I served with LAPD. I was a sworn peace officer, a cop for LAPD. I worked regular patrol assignments and more specialized assignments. One of those more specialized assignments was warrant service, fugitive recovery. Also had some other law enforcement roles. I am an FBI certified firearms instructor and been certified by another 3-letter government agency in a lot of firearms and training things. I've also been a private contractor, worked in the private sector, pertaining to tactics and gunfighting and protecting America from enemies foreign and domestic. I served as the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters in a large metropolitan area. That was our primary mission, to stop active shooters, which sadly are a thing in America today. I've also been blessed to do quite a bit of competition shooting. Started my first formal competitions even before joining the Marine Corps at 17. I had won more shooting competitions than I can remember. I have competed in all manner of disciplines in shooting. I've been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion, West Coast regional champion. Like I said, been blessed to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. Mentioned hunting. I've hunted to put meat on the table, starting when I was a child. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide, hunting and slaying all manner of beast. And I don't apologize for that. Humbled to be the host of 3 podcasts. Simple Man Sermons, Alpha Male Podcast, and Gunfighter Life. Obviously, as things not mentioned, I've been blessed to do many other things. But, again, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, a believer and follower of the Bible, the Word, Jesus Christ. And I don't apologize for that. With that, let's transition into today's topic. So you heard my bio. If you want to thank me for my service and you like the podcast, scroll down, especially if you're on iTunes or Spotify. Hit the stars, leave a review. It's a quick, free, easy way to support the podcast. If you want to do more or you want more content, goodshepherdtraining.com. With that, let's talk about revolvers, wheel guns, the old 6-shooter. Let's talk about it. And some may ask, somewhat validly, why? Why are we talking about this in 2022? Why are we talking about revolvers? In the world of the SIG P365, in the world of the Springfield Hellcat, I mean, even in the world of the basic Smith & Wesson M&P Shield that's been around a long time. In a lot of these small, light, compact 9mm handguns, why? Why are we even discussing the revolver? So I will concede in starting this, the big elephant in the room, capacity. Capacity is a big deal, and it is a drawback for the revolver. Nobody's going to argue that your modern semi-automatic carry handguns aren't going to have more firepower on board, more firepower potential than a revolver. A lot of your most common configuration of a revolver is 6 shots. That's why it's called a 6-shooter. But many of the carry size revolvers have 5 shots. And if you're going to carry a bigger revolver, you may get 7 or 8 shots, maybe even more. But it's really unusual to get more than 8 unless you're getting something really unique. So let's say between 5 and 8 rounds for the sake of argument. Why would you ever decide to carry that in a world with these plastic striker fire, seemingly Wonder 9s that hold, 12, 15 rounds in a subcompact magazine and a subcompact frame? Why would you give up all that capacity unless you just wanted to make pretend, that you're Wyatt Earp, or for the sake of nostalgia? Why would you handicap yourself with 5, 6, 7, 8 rounds? Well, I'd submit that revolvers are still relevant, and although they do have some drawbacks, they have a lot of advantages. I would encourage you to go back and listen to the CQB episode, Close Quarters Battle, Close Quarters Combat. You've listened to my bio, you may surmise from that I've been in a few tussles. And I've been in more tussles than I can remember. And not because I've been hit in the head a lot, which is also true, but because I've been in a lot of tussles. A lot of fights end up on the ground. And a lot of people that are in this gun culture, this fantasy part of gun culture where they picture themselves, well, even John Wick. He gets in fights. I've seen one of the John Wick movies, but I'm sure he got in fights. A lot of fights in real life end up on the ground. They end up tussling. They end up in close quarters where you're grabbing each other, where you're grappling. Now, one thing that I don't mention is in the bio, I have quite a bit of fighting experience, ground fighting experience, and wrestling background. It's usually not relevant, but I'm bringing it up here because it is. A lot of fights end up like that, where you're out of breath on the ground, struggling, rolling around, trying to just get free or get a hit in. The revolver in this world holds some advantages over that semi-auto. A few big ones are these. Now, not all, but I'll say all common models of handgun, semi-automatic pistols, have this issue. If you shove the barrel muzzle hard into something, you will take that gun out of battery and it will not fire. So if you're rummaging around on the ground, if you are shoving the gun into something that you want to shoot and you push that slide back even fractions of an inch, it will not fire. You can see how in this world that is a problem. In this kind of arena, that's a real thing that really happens. Not to mention the other problem of there's often clothing and things grabbing and you're in very tight spaces. If that slide does not reciprocate fully, meaning going all the way back and all the way forward, with no or very, very little interference, it will cause a malfunction, which means you get one shot. It's a real thing, like if somebody's grabbing the slide of the pistol trying to not get shot, or if it's pressed up against somebody's body, or it's, say, in your pocket. In that case, the gun, assuming it's already loaded, will give you 1 shot. These are some big disadvantages in this arena that the revolver does not suffer from. The revolver doesn't have any of these. You can shove a revolver as hard as you want into whatever it is you're wanting to shoot, and it will still fire. And not only will it fire once, you can shove that muzzle as hard as you want, and you can fire as many times as there are rounds in that gun. You can see how this could be a distinct advantage. Now, I will say that if somebody grabs the cylinder hard on a revolver, it can stop it from spinning and cause it to malfunction. But shy of that, the revolver can be in a pocket. The revolver can be laying up against somebody or something, and it'll still fire. There's no slide that has to go all the way back and all the way forward. So in these confined space, close quarters, extreme close quarters situation, you can see how the revolver may have some distinct advantages. Also, less, I think, important unless you live in a state that requires it. But a magazine disconnect, if you're in this world rolling around, it's pretty likely that if you hit the magazine disconnect, if you have a magazine disconnect, you get 1 shot. Now, if you are the guy and it's your gun and you're trying to shoot an adversary trying to kill you, that's a bad thing. If you are rolling around, wrestling around, and either you or he hit the mag release, and now you have 1 round, or you have no rounds. Because if you hit the magazine release and there's a magazine cutoff, even if you have a round in the chamber, it won't fire with one of these devices, a magazine disconnect. The gun is now so safe you might die. So safe it might get you killed. Revolvers don't suffer from this. They don't suffer from the requirement of a magazine disconnect, and they don't suffer from, if you are rolling around fighting over a gun, hitting the mag release and the ammunition coming out. Also, in a almost completely opposite arena, if you're out hiking or doing something like that, it is not unheard of for you to be hiking with a semi-auto and then you reach for it at the end of the day and your magazine is gone. One of the reasons to carry a spare magazine, but it does happen. Just weird positions, crawling over brush, crawling over rocks, jumping, doing all manner of things can hit that magazine release and your magazine can fall out. And if you're doing something strenuous or where the ground is soft and you're not going to hear it and that magazine falls out, you may not even know. Again, the revolver does not suffer from this deficiency. Now let's talk about another advantage. Now for a semi-auto handgun, we talked about that slide has to go all the way back and all the way forward. So let's say for a given caliber, let's say 9mm. Now there are some variations, but in general, let's say you're shooting let's go from one end of the common spectrum to the other. You're shooting 115 grain at 1350 feet a second. Or you're shooting a 147 grain at 950 feet a second. You're still basically getting the same amount of force to push the slide back and forward. You can't really get outside that too far one way or the other because you need a certain set amount of force to cycle that slide. Too little and the slide won't cycle and the gun will malfunction. Too much and you'll blow up the gun. The revolver doesn't have to deal with this because you, by pulling the trigger, if it's a double action revolver, or cocking the hammer if it's a single action or double single action, take your pick, ammunition does not cause the gun to function or not. You pulling the trigger and or cocking the hammer causes the gun to function. Because of this, you can get a lot more flexible in ammo. You can go much lighter or much heavier. For your 9mm handgun, you're shooting 9mm. For your .380, you're shooting .380. The common revolver calibers will shoot both or more than 2 different kinds of ammunition. Your quintessential one, your .357 Magnum 38 Special. You can shoot really light, really mild, let's say cowboy action loads, or your classic 148 grain lead semi-wad cutter standard pressure 38 Special, which is a very mild round. And you can push it all the way up if it's a .357 to your, Buffalo Bore, hard cast, 180 grain, really screaming high-powered rounds in the same gun. And it will not affect the function of that gun. At least it shouldn't if the gun's working properly. I can't say never. But if it's a good, well-made revolver, neither one of those will have any effect on the function of that gun. Now, you'll probably have a different point of aim, point of impact. You need to figure what that is for you and your gun. But, the shape of the bullet, the amount of powder in the projectile, whether it's 38 or 357, really should have no impact on how the gun functions, unlike a 9mm where some can be finicky, some like a certain kind of ammo and not others. So it's a lot more flexible, whether you want to go lower in power, either for training or for shooting small game, or because you just don't like the recoil, or you want to go really hot in powder. Say you want to hunt deer or bear or something with a small to medium size or a large revolver. You can do that. Now, there is a myth out there that revolvers never malfunction. A lot of times from people that love revolvers. Revolvers do malfunction. And if you're a revolver sommelier, you may hear something now that you don't want to, but when revolvers malfunction, it's generally catastrophic. A lot of times when semi-autos malfunction, it's a tap rack bang. Or a stovepipe or a double feed, something you can quickly fix usually in the course of a gunfight. If a revolver malfunctions, you're having a bad day. Say a round stuck in the forcing cone or something like that, that revolver's just done without a gunsmith. And a lot of people think revolvers are simpler. That is true and false. Revolvers are simpler in their manual of arms, meaning for the end user to use them, they are very simple. But if you've ever taken apart a revolver to Cerakote it to clean it on the inside because it got really nasty and tried to put it back together, you quickly learn that, let's say your very common handgun, your Smith & Wesson, take your pick, they're all a lot of the same parts, K-frame, is far, far more complicated internally than your Glock 19 is. Far more moving parts, far more hand fitting, far more precision having to work together inside in the internals. So simpler maybe for the end user, but as far as internally and parts that can go wrong and break and come out of time and all those other things, they are not simpler. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and make it seem like the revolver is the end-all be-all. It has its drawbacks too. But we've also talked about a lot of advantages. So I'm going to submit that it is not. I'm going to get into a quick story. The last job that I had, I was a general manager for a firearms and training company. Now, I left that job so that I could give more time to these podcasts and get the information that I've accumulated in that bio that you heard, so I could get that out to you to benefit, the listening audience, to pass that knowledge on. Talents are meant to be shared and grown. Hopefully you guys appreciate this content. If you do, please consider going to goodshepherdtraining.com. There's a Patreon link on there, a Venmo link on there. Again, that's goodshepherdtraining.com if you value this content. But anyway, back to that prior job. I was working and a guy came in to get some trigger time in, which hats off to him. And he was a tow truck driver. Now he's often literally laying on his back, wiggling under vehicles, crawling under vehicles, and who knows what kind of neighborhood he's in. He doesn't really get to pick that. He's literally crawling on his belly or bending over or all kinds of things as a tow truck driver. As a cop, I, got cars towed quite a bit, and I remember seeing those guys doing all kinds of crazy stuff to get the vehicles up on the trucks. They don't get to pick, like I said. They could be in a really nice neighborhood, a really crappy neighborhood. All kinds of cars break down and get towed. From the rich soccer mom's car to the gangster's car. In that kind of environment, he's kind of limited. He probably isn't carrying small to the back because he's going to be scraping the crap out of his gun. Probably not carrying an appendix because he's got to bend over a lot and he's crawling on his belly, so appendix is not great. Probably carrying in his pocket. Probably pretty dirty and nasty sometimes. If you picture scenarios that he may likely be in, a ground fight is not unlikely. Wait till he's vulnerable under a car or something, decide that they're going to do whatever they're going to do, whoever wants to do him evil. Very likely he's going to be in a close quarter situation on the ground. Like we talked about, there's a lot of advantage to the revolver. For a guy like that, I'd say it might not only be relevant, it may be the best choice. And for a lot of other people, for a lot of other reasons. That's just the latest real-world example I could think of. And I still a lot of times carry a revolver. When I went to work for LAPD after the Marine Corps, they issued us our duty sidearm. Now, I didn't stick with that gun throughout my whole police career because I think it was a crappy choice. I won't get into that. But we had to buy our own backup guns, and most of us carried backup guns or qualified with backup guns. And one of the most common ones, Smith & Wesson J-frame. That was the first handgun I ever bought with my own money. I still have it. It is my wife's, let's call it, center console gun. She does have a CCW gun, but sometimes she forgets, and I'd rather have that option than not have it. And I'd rather it be in the car. No, I was issued an M9 in the Marine Corps, but that was the first handgun I ever bought with my own money. And I still have it, and it's still a great gun. I still know the serial number on it. Years and years after running that gun and messing it up and breaking it and wearing it down, yeah, revolvers do break, I upgraded to the Smith & Wesson 360 PD, also a J-frame, but it's scandium, super light 357 Magnum. A lot of people either love or hate that gun. I really like mine. It's not my go-to EDC gun. It is not. My go-to EDC gun is a 6 Hour P226 Legion single action only. Worlds are different apart between those two. Can't always have that on me. People that say dress around your gun. Do you work out? Do you go to the gym? Do you go running? If I'm doing wind sprints, kind of hard to do wind sprints with that gun. If I'm working out, kind of hard. But I can certainly work out with the Smith & Wesson 360 PD, a 357 Magnum J-frame revolver that weighs 11 ounces and something. I know because I do it. There are times when you can't just carry a bigger gun and do what you're doing. So yeah, I think very much revolvers are still relevant. They're still the best option sometimes for some people, or all the time for some people. Now with that said, let's transition into what do I think are the best carry revolvers today in 2022. I'd say you get into this world and you get the same kind of trade-off you get in the semi-automatic CCW world. In general, in the vast majority of cases, the bigger you go, the easier the gun is to shoot, and shoot accurately and quickly and consistently. The smaller you go, the harder that is to accomplish, but the easier it is to conceal. Example, Glock 43 and a Glock 34. Glock 34 is the long slide competition. Think of it as the extra long Glock 17. It's a competition gun. It's a great gun. It's easy to run fast with that gun. Shoots, I should say, it shoots objectively better, faster, more accurate. If you're running plate racks or trying to do Mozambique drills, you're going to be faster, more accurate, and more consistent, especially at distance with the Glock 34 than the Glock 43. But that's a big freaking gun. Like I said, I conceal carry full-size handgun as my go-to. Most people don't do that, though. That trade-off there. And you get that same trade-off in the revolver world. You know, a medium size, Smith & Wesson K-frame with a 4-inch or 5-inch barrel is a beautiful shooter, beautifully accurate. Just like in the semi-auto world, for the same cartridge with a bigger, heavier gun, you're almost always going to get less perceived recoil. Because that recoil goes into one of two places. It goes into the gun or in your hand. The more gun there is, the less it goes into your hand. Same thing with a revolver. There's no difference. And this is not, some revelation that I came up with. It's just simple physics. So, yeah, a medium size, what you would think of as the old cop duty handguns, a Smith & Wesson K-frame, if you're blessed enough to have one, a Colt Python, those are beautifully shooting, smooth guns. But that's a big gun to carry. Smith & Wesson J-frame, as much as they get pushed on ladies and things like that, new shooters and novices, it's really more of an expert's gun. It's a hard gun to shoot well. Love mine. One of my criteria for a carry gun is I have to be able to make headshots at 25 yards. My go-to carry guns, my standard practice, my standard training usually consists of headshots at 50 yards. The most I'm willing to compromise on that is that gun has to be capable of headshots at 25 yards, consistently. Just standing there shooting, not off a bench or anything. Smith & Wesson J-frame will do that. Gun is accurate. The Smith & Wesson J-frame is a ridiculously accurate gun, mechanically. But here's the caveat. It takes a master to realize the potential accuracy of that gun. Far more than Smith & Wesson K-frame, a bigger revolver. Like let's say a 6-inch Smith & Wesson K-frame. Get a good competent shooter that can get good headshot hits at 25 yards with a big Smith & Wesson K-frame, medium-sized revolver with a 6-inch barrel, which is not unheard of. They're probably not doing that with a J-frame. They get really, really good, and they're getting consistent headshots at 50 yards with that gun or 60, 75 yards with that gun. They can probably get headshots at 25 with a J-frame. A J-frame is a master's gun. Little, small, 5-shot. If you get the airweight version, super light. If you're talking about the double action, long, heavy, but very smooth. You're talking about the single action, just beautiful. Shy of a 1911, one of the most beautiful trigger pulls you'll ever feel. And I say Smith & Wesson J-frame. There's a lot of guns that have copied the Smith & Wesson J-frame or its competition, like the little Colt Detective Specials. They're great. If you're on a budget, the Charter Arms, still American made, still lightweight, good revolvers. They're pretty much a copy of the Smith & Wesson. The Smith & Wesson obviously has been around a long time. Its patent has long since expired. Anything in that size is very carryable and very capable. You're still talking about 5 rounds of 38 Special or 5 rounds of 357 Magnum at the maximum. And let's not forget, people kind of crap on the 38 Special. 38 Special was a police standard in this country for a long time, for a big chunk of the 1900s. It was like what cops carried, 38 Specials. And a lot of times not even hollow points. And they got the job done. Were they the best? Were they as good as, modern 9mm hollow points? No. But they put plenty of people in the dirt. And they still will. So that is a great carry option today, or any of its copies. Like I said, the Charter Arms, great. Colts, I'm not used to them. I'm very used to the Smith & Wessons, but had I cut my teeth on the Colt, I probably would like it as much. I don't think there's much difference. One cylinder spins clockwise, one cylinder spins counterclockwise. Charter Arms makes a copy. Like we talked about, those are good guns. Something very similar to that's been around a while now. I still think of it as a new gun, but it's really not. It's been around a long time. Is the Ruger LCRs. The LCR is a good gun, and it kind of brings some of the innovation we have in the semi-automatic world into the revolver world. You get that polymer. You get that polymer frame in a revolver. It has a completely different, trigger mechanism. Make hammered and hammerless models. They make it in 38. They make it in 357. Also make it in 9mm. So if you are almost strictly a 9mm semi-automatic handgun guy and you want to get into the world of revolvers, but you don't want a whole different caliber and get that for preparedness, for survival, for just living through an ammo shortage like we are still living through and have lived through for the past couple of years. Maybe you have 9mm, you have enough of it, and you're like, I don't want to deal with getting another caliber. I'd say that's not an unwise choice. Ruger LCP comes in 9mm. Ruger also makes, not really a copy, but copy similar to the J-frame. They're quite a bit heavier though. Ruger's known for making big, beefy revolvers. The SP-101. The SP-101 is a great, heavy, well-made, but still small revolver. Ruger revolvers, at least our metal ones, are kind of known for being built like tanks, and they kind of are. They're kind of overbuilt, and that's not a bad thing. One thing that I like about them is Ruger always has offered quite a bit of stainless options, and if you've listened for any length of time, you'll know that I like that. The SP-101 is a good choice. If this is your one go-to carry gun and you're carrying a small, what I would consider subcompact size revolver, if you're carrying it in your pocket, you're probably sticking with the standard 1 7/8 inch or 2-inch barrel as it's often referred to. Both the J-frame and the SP-101, if you're not carrying in a pocket, I would really recommend looking for a barrel that's a little bit longer. 2.5 inch, 3 inch is just beautiful in those still small, narrow revolvers. If you're carrying it on a belt or some other way, not in your pocket, it really is nice to have a little bit longer barrel. That's where your sight radius is. You're going to get a little bit more weight out front. It's going to help manage that recoil a little bit better, in my opinion. I think those make fantastic carry revolvers. If you're going to EDC a revolver day to day, if you're going to everyday carry a revolver and that's your go-to, Just like I would encourage you to carry a larger semi-automatic handgun. I would not encourage you to carry, the Ruger LCP for your day-to-day unless that's all you can get away with. And it's a trade-off. It's very carryable. The Ruger LCPs are very carryable. But in a variety of common defensive scenarios, shooting scenarios, and shootability, they're not going to be as good as, let's say, a full-size Wesson M&P. I'm just picking stuff. Or your SIG 226, or your, what's a real common one, the Glock 19. And it's way, way smaller. It's like comparing a hummingbird to a turkey. They're both birds, but one's way bigger than the other. But one's also more shootable too. I would encourage you to, day to day, if you can, carry a bigger semi-auto if you're going to carry a semi-auto. I would encourage you to carry a bigger revolver if you're going to carry a revolver. And I would say police, FBI, those guys carried revolvers for a long time, and most of them carried the class I'm going to talk about now. And that is your, what I would call standard size. And that's your Smith & Wesson K-frame. That's your iconic kind of police revolver. Smith & Wesson K-frames are great. N-frames, anywhere in that mid-size. You can look these up to get an idea of the size. And really 3 inches to 5 inches. 6 inches starts getting a little bit hard to carry. I know, I've done it. But anywhere from that 3 to 5 inches is your sweet spot. And the most common is 4. A 4-inch medium-sized revolver is a beautiful thing. The most common thing you're going to find them in is 357-38 Special, for good reason. The cylinder is normal size. You get 6 or 7 rounds. A real common one is a Smith & Wesson 686 or 686 Plus. And if you're in the Ruger world, you're going to step up to the GP100, from the SP101 to the GP100. And these really are built like tanks. You could probably build a patio deck hammering in nails with these guns and they would be fine. And that's not even an exaggeration. There are others. Colt is making a Python again. I haven't had a lot of first-hand experience with the new Pythons. Just like a lot of new guns when they first came out, they had issues, but as I understand, they work fine now. And there are others, both past and present, but those are the most predominant ones. Or anything in that size, get one with good sights, get one that's made well. You're going to trust your life to it. Get a design that's proven. Don't get the brand new thing that just comes out. We just talked about a lot of times when guns first come out, they have issues. Get one that's proven. Get a, Smith & Wesson 686, SP101 with a 3-inch barrel, or GP100, 4-inch revolver. That's a formidable weapon. Now let's say, you know what, that's just not alpha enough for me. I want bigger and badder. I want big and bad. You can get big with a revolver. You can step up from this. From your Colt Python to your Colt Anaconda. You can step up from your SP101 to your GP100, even more to your Ruger Red Hawk. It's a large frame revolver. We're talking large frame revolvers. You can step up from the J frame to the K frame to, I believe it's the N frame, and let's say like your Dirty Harry gun, 44 mag, which is also going to be the most common chambering in these revolvers for the Ruger. The Ruger, Red Hawk, Super Red Hawk, your Colt Anaconda. They come in other calibers, but that's just like the medium frame and the small frame are quintessentially 38 Special, 357. Your large frames are kind of quintessentially 44 mag. Now you can go 45 Long Colt, 454 Casull, but that's generally what we're talking. You can get even crazier than that. Those guns really, you might as well carry a rifle. They're so ridiculously big. There may be some times when you want to carry a big frame revolver. Say you're primarily a woodsman, you're out in the woods, you are hunting, you are scouting, you want a lot of firepower that's repeatable. You're actually hunting with a handgun, which is something that I love. Or let's say you're in bear country. That may be a time you want a 44 mag in a revolver with repeatability. I don't think 44 mag is a great, CCW caliber against people, but we're not always talking about people. Again, there are other things that want to kill you. And there are options for that. Like we talked about the revolver. The revolver's functionality, unless you get so crazy you blow the gun up, you can go really mild or really, really hot on the ammo. So you can shoot really, really hot 44 mag. It's much more powerful than any handgun, common semi-automatic handgun, besides something like a Desert Eagle, which again, you're probably not carrying that. That thing, you might as well carry a rifle. Even something we think of as a very powerful semi-automatic handgun, a 10mm, and that is on the very powerful end of handguns. Ballistics are not equivalent to a .44 Magnum. If you've listened for any length of time, you know that I'm into survival. I don't apologize for that. An advantage we didn't talk about, survival context of a revolver. And I'm talking just like defensive scenarios, likely survival scenarios, not John Wick in a zombie movie. Actual likely scenarios. One of the things, like I said, revolvers are complicated inside, but the end user manual is pretty simple. They're pretty closed systems. You have to work hard to get dirt inside a revolver. They're generally more forgiving of neglect is the best way to put it. So a good, stainless steel revolver is a hard thing to beat as far as reliability and long-term, harsh environment use. Also, we talked about the ammo. It doesn't really need to be a certain parameter for the weapon to cycle. As long as there's enough power to get the bullet out the barrel, the ammunition should not be the cause of a malfunction for that revolver. So what if you're in a scenario after you make your own ammo? Well, you're like, people reload 9mm all the time, and that's true. What if you have to reload with black powder? Because you can generally make black powder. Just a person with some basic chemistry knowledge and the formula can make black powder with very little infrastructure. Probably not doing that with smokeless powder. And 38 Special was designed around the black powder era. Had black powder loadings. You can still load it with black powder. Although like the .44 Magnum wasn't, you can still load it with black powder. Again, as long as it gets the bullet out the barrel, that next round will fire in that gun. Don't know that you even could put enough black powder in a 9mm cycle to slide. It's a lot more voluminous. It takes up a lot more volume per power measure than smokeless powder does. If you look at a 38 Special and a 9mm side by side, the 38 Special is way, way bigger. It's not because it's way more powerful. It's because it was literally designed in a time where you shot black powder. You needed that much room to fit that much black powder in there. When you went to 9mm, just a few years later, turn of the century, in late 1800s for the 38 Special, we're talking very early 1900s, 1902, 1908 for the 9mm, smokeless powder took up way less space. And that's great. It's one of the reasons you get these 9mm now that are subcompact to hold so many rounds. If you have to load with black powder, you want that bigger case capacity. Also, since it's a moderate velocity, just hard cast lead bullets. And again, make your own black powder. And if you know how, which I'm not going to get into, you can make primers. It's not rocket science. It's not like baking a cake, but it's also not rocket science. Whereas like making smokeless propellants kind of is rocket science. So it has that going for it. Again, for a variety of scenarios, you get more flexibility in ammo, which is a big advantage. I know that they do make birdshot for 9mm, so you don't have to send me any hate mail on this, but generally that will not cycle the gun. You can put a whole cylinder of birdshot for whatever scenario you want. Take care of rattlesnakes, shooting rats in a barn, very small game, small bird hunting, a revolver, and it will cycle just fine. So we talked about going hot. Your common 38 Special 357 Magnum, I can get or make hard cast semi-wad cutter 180 grain bullets, which will kill pretty much anything. You can hunt deer with them, you can hunt elk with them. It wouldn't be my first choice, but people have done it and have done it successfully. For a deer size game, it works just fine. Good medium-sized revolver with hard cast 180 grain bullets. Again, that's a lot of firepower, 357 Magnum. We talked about, not being able to lose that magazine. That comes in survival as well. We often think of we're going to be, this fantasy world where there's gunfight after gunfight. Well, if that's true, you're probably not living super long. Go long, long periods of time where you're just carrying that gun. And again, spending time hiking in the woods with a long gun with a handgun, you'll know that you can inadvertently hit that magazine release and lose that magazine. Hopefully you have a backup magazine. Draw that weapon out and find out that's the time that you need it and there's no magazine in it and there's a magazine disconnect. That's a bad day. Whereas that revolver, it might only have 5 or 6 rounds, but you're not losing that. I can't imagine how you're going to lose that cylinder. They don't come off unless you literally disassemble the gun. And if you're dealing with this kind of scenario where your ammo might get wet, it might get humid, it might get dirty, might get oil in it, if that round doesn't fire, you don't have to worry about tap, rack, bang. In a simple scenario like that, you just pull the trigger again and it aligns the next round in the cylinder with the barrel and you fire. So if you get a click, you just pull the trigger again. Whereas in a semi-auto, almost all semi-autos, you have to tap, rack, bang, which takes time. So again, it's not best for everything. I won't even say the revolver is best for most things. I won't even say it's best for most people for most of the time CCW. But for some people, for many reasons, it is a good, solid choice. And I would much rather have somebody with a Smith & Wesson J-frame that practices with it and knows his carry ammo and his point of aim, point of impact, than the guy that buys a SIG 365 with a red dot and thinks it's some kind of security blanket he can just have, and it will somehow do something for him. So are they still relevant? Yes. Do they have pros and cons? Yes. Issue them to like a military for a fighting force? No. But are they good for CCW? Yes. And are they even better in some scenarios than a lot of the modern semi-automatic handguns? I'd say yeah. Again, not the majority, but in some niche situations. With that, men, I want to say thanks for listening to this episode of Gunfighter Life. If you liked it, again, scroll down, hit some stars, Spotify, iTunes, quick, easy. If you really want to support, or if you want to become part of our insider chat that we have just for patrons, think of it as like a virtual tribe of men that are into all these kind of things, where we help each other. It's not just me talking to people on there, it's us helping each other on there. Really humbling thing that I get to be a part of. And if you want to be a part of it too, consider going to goodshepherdtraining.com. There's a Patreon link on there. If you don't want to be a part of that and you just want to give one time, again, there's a Venmo link on there. Either way, check out goodshepherdtraining.com. Hopefully you like it. And as a thank you for listening through all of that, I'm going to give you a couple of tactical tips today. One applies to more than just revolvers, but it's really handy on a revolver. I told you that revolvers internally are very complicated. If you are going to take apart your revolver, please try and remember to take out that smartphone that you probably have and take a picture on each step along the way, which way everything's oriented. They're quite complex machines inside, kind of like looking at a watch. Having pictures of how that thing goes back together and which way things go is really nice. I know we live in the age of YouTube, but sometimes it's nice to have a picture of your gun and the way it's put together on certain steps. Try and take just snapshots. It doesn't really cost anything. When you get done, you can delete them. Pictures of how that gun is getting taken apart so that you can put it back together. If you ever have to take a revolver apart, that one little tactical tip could save you a lot of not just time, but frustration. The next one, we talked about one of the obvious drawbacks, probably the biggest drawback to the revolver, is capacity. So there are a lot of ways to reload a revolver. The two main ways that are faster than just loose rounds in a pocket, are speed loaders, which is basically a round contraption of different various, let's say, patent numbers to get those rounds lined up and dropped into the cylinder. These are by far faster, but they're kind of big and bulky. Again, if you're concealed carrying this handgun, maybe a good option, maybe not. The other way are speed strips, and these hold your rounds in a straight line. These are handy, easily concealable. You can put them in a shirt pocket, in a pants pocket, in a back pocket. That's generally what I will use if I'm carrying the J-frame. I'm carrying a J-frame and a way to reload, it'll be on speed strips. That's not the tactical tip. The tactical tip is get one bigger than you need. One that holds more rounds. Let's say your revolver typically holds 6 rounds. Get one that holds 8. The reason for this, we talked about the way you generally load these are loading 2 at a time, snapping them off 2 at a time. You leave a gap, whatever configuration, you got to play with this on your reloads. But leaving a gap really makes it easier to grab, like a handle, so you can get your finger, your index finger, in between those rounds because there's an empty spot. It's much easier to line up those 2 rounds and break it off. Instead of just getting a 5-shot one, if you have a 5-shot gun, maybe get a 6 or 7-shot. If you have a 6-round, get an 8-round one. So you can leave those gaps in between the second rounds. the pairs of rounds, so you can quickly index them and snap them in faster. It can be quite nerve-wracking trying to get a fully loaded speed strip and break them off two at a time in your chamber. If you're talking about being in a gunfight and having to do a speed reload from speed strips, that's a bad day. But I'd much rather have two quickly indexed and in there now and shut the cylinder. Going to be more important to get those 2 rounds in there quickly and shut it, or 4 rounds in there quickly and shut it. That extra 1 or 2 rounds you can have on the speed strip, but it's taking you forever to index it. So that's a tactical tip. Get a speed strip bigger than what your gun takes. Leave a gap in there however you want to index it after the first 2 rounds. Well, that's your tactical tip of the day. The tactical verse of the day is coming at you from Psalm 55. Cast your burden on Adonai, and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken, but you, O God, will bring them down to the pit of destruction. Bloodthirsty and deceitful men, who will not live out half their days, but I will trust in you. Thanks, and have a blessed day.